All right. Just got the thumbs up. We're ready to go. It's good to see everybody here this morning. Glad you're able to be here. We're in the Gospel of Mark on our study this morning, lesson 4. If you don't have a lesson book, I believe, Terry, you had some additional copies made? They are back in the bag. I'm sorry, I didn't see on my way in. So I know some of you were looking for additional books as we've gone along. So please, they're in the back there. Pick you one up. So again, Mark chapter 4. We're already down toward the end of chapter 4. We'll be starting along verse 34, 35 of Mark chapter 4 and going through chapter 5 this morning. So once again, glad you're here. Glad to have Eric here this morning helping me out. May just let him do the whole thing. We'll go from there. So we're gonna start with a word of prayer. We do have some mics before we get started. For those of you that are not aware, we have Facebook streaming, and we try to use mics when we can so that people at home can hear the comments. Some people are uncomfortable with mics. That's fine. You can just speak out, and we'll do our best to paraphrase what you say, so the audience at home can hear you, we'll go from there. So appreciate everybody and your cooperation in that manner as well. My mic runners, Jonathan Bailey has one, Jason Aiken has one, and Terry has one this morning. And I'm going to ask that Jonathan, if you will, to lead us in the opening prayer this morning.
Our awesome God, our Father in heaven, it is such a blessing to be together this morning to worship you. It is good for us to be here. Father, we just ask that as we study this morning from your word, that your word will be open to us, our hearts will be open to it. And as we look at the life of Jesus and how he lived and what he taught, that we will pay attention, and we will learn from it, and that we can strive everything we do to serve you just as he did and to follow his example. That you will guide us in our study. In Christ's name we pray. Amen.
Man. Okay. So we'll start it this morning. Again, verse 34, we wound up Mark chapter 4, going through several parables this past week and discussing those of Jesus. And it says in verse 34, he did not speak to them without a parable, but privately to his own disciples he explained everything. And then we just go straight into this next section. And on that day when evening had come, he said to them, let us go across to the other side. So who was it that it suggested that they go across to the other side? Did I hear Jesus? Yeah? Okay. That's right. So he's the one that suggests that. All right? So why do you think that's important? Why do you think that's important? Anybody thought about that question? It's actually question 1. There's an opportunity for him to show his with the storm that would be coming. So you would think Jesus might know that. It's an opportunity. Okay, what else? What'd he say?
Peace and quiet.
Okay, peace and quiet. I got it now. All right, thanks. What else?
Is this when he goes on the other side of the lake to the land of the Gerasenes?
Yeah.
Okay, there's a guy over there he's going to see.
Okay, there's a guy he's going to see. I mean, there's no wrong answer here. We're just talking out loud. Those are all good comments. So what have we just talked about prior to this? The whole first section of we've had these parables, right? And Denise and I were talking about this morning. Seeing this the way that maybe as we actually read it without all the breaks, seeing it the way it is. Now, again, I don't know, and most of you here know Joe wrote this material, right? He wrote the material that we're going out of. So I don't, and Eric and I were talking about it this morning, and John Clemens was like, how do you take Joe Smith's mind and teach it when he's not the one teaching it? I said, amen, brother. But in reality, so I don't know Joe Smith's mind in reality, all this, but what I will say is Joe's here, so we'll get that in a minute. But the bottom line is, we've had these parables, and what were these parables really discussing prior to this that we talked about last week? What were they focused on? Faith. Really? Right? I mean, that's the reality. And so, now Jesus suggested them to go across the lake, and the first answer over here this morning, has to do a lot with the fact, number one, I think he's got to get some rest. I mean, that's probably part of it, and that kind of stuff. But what does Jesus know? I don't know what his mind was knowing in regards to this storm, but we're fixing to see how this all ties together, in my opinion. Okay? So, what do? They go out on the lake. What would... Eric,
well,
what
there's
do
a
you got?
storm coming. There's a storm coming. I'm with John. I think that, Jesus is on a mission. And just going in reverse a little bit, Joe's pointed this out. Mark is an action-packed gospel.
Right. It is.
It is just one thing after the next. And it is an action movie, if you will.
Yep.
Just one thing after the next going on. When I've reading through the Gospels and reading through Mark, you read about these events taking place.
Right.
And you don't think much about it, to be honest with you. You read it, okay, here's another miracle.
Another one.
I've read this in another one of the Gospels before. I've read this, but there's actually in every one of these instances, there's some depth to it as well, and to read it and to study it like we have in these questions helps to understand, the Bible. I think a mile wide and a mile deep versus a mile wide and an inch deep.
There you go.
Because there's some stuff, like later we're going to talk about some healings, and I'd never thought much about this,
Right.
the healings that took place until this study came up. But they're clearly, Jesus is on a mission. He's wanting to get to the other side. He's gonna heal this demoniac guy, this guy that's been suffering with these demons, and he's on a mission there. And at the same time, we're about to get a lesson. Go ahead, Terry.
Well, I was just going to add that I don't know how Joe's mind works either, but the parables right before this are about the kingdom.
Yeah. Kingdom. That's right.
And he's going to a place where if he's going to be the kind of king the Jews are looking for, he shouldn't be going.
That's true.
And I think in here there's a little bit of a revelation about what the nature of the kingdom is going to be like. That it's not just going to be for the Jews.
No doubt.
And I do believe he gets in the boat because he's going to cast out this legion of demons. I think that's his purpose.
Okay.
I think that's his intention. And it's just interesting to put that in the context of the kingdom parables and showing the disciples.
Sure.
He's going to be in a place with unclean animals and
Yep.
all kinds of stuff in this story. So pretty interesting.
Yeah, so I kind of wanted to bring it up that way to get comments in so that we could set the stage for this and kind of get some thoughts rattling around in our heads, because I think there's multiple thoughts here. But I agree, he's definitely on a mission. And I think it's multi-layered. Yes.
So we mentioned faith, and Jesus always trying to grow our faith. He's trying to grow our faith, and I think he's trying to grow the faith of these men. At least 4 of his apostles are fishermen. They're familiar with going out in the water. They know when to go out in the water and when not to go out in the water. Because if you've ever been stuck out in a boat and a big storm comes up, it's not a very good feeling.
Yeah.
I have. Fishing with my dad, and you go out in the fishing by myself. You go out in the boat and you get stuck in a lightning storm, you want to find the shore quickly. Okay?
Yeah, sure.
So when Jesus tells them, he says, let's cross over to the other side of the sea. Where's he at? He's in the boat already.
That's right.
Okay? Now, they probably think, it's been kind of a red sunset this evening. It's probably not a good idea to get out on that lake today. Well, what do? They go. Okay? They go because they've got faith in him. But they don't have faith, they don't have full faith, right? They got faith in him, but when the storm brews up, they're going to die, right? So they've got faith enough to listen to him because he says, since he was in the boat and the other boats were with him, so they went. Even though they knew it was probably a bad idea, but
Sure.
they didn't have the faith that he needed them to have yet either.
Agreed. Appreciate the comment. So, yeah, as we see in question 2, they take Jesus as he was, and he falls asleep. And then we also talk about, so before we get into that, he falls asleep. Now, he gets on the boat. Number one, you also point out the fact, this is something I think we talked about in another class recently, this wasn't the only boat, okay? There were other boats too, all right? So I think it's kind of important to note the fact, there's crowds, right? And he's getting in his boat. So there's other boats too. We don't know what happens with these other boats. You get in a storm like that, they probably turned tail and went back, or whatever. But there were others as well. It's something to point out. But what does Jesus do when he gets on the boat? He goes to sleep, right? And so, he's on a mission. We're already talked about that. There's a number of things that we can talk about in regards to that as we develop this out. But he goes to sleep, and then the storm happens. And so, all this is going on. But one of the questions that Joe gave us here in 2 was, can you think of other times, okay, where it says other times where the disciples are mentioned, and note the difference in this idea of falling asleep.
I had Garden of Gethsemane,
So did I.
but the script was flipped.
Yep.
Jesus is sleeping here.
That's right.
And the disciples feel like they're in peril.
Yeah.
And don't understand how Jesus can be sleeping.
Correct.
And in the garden we get Jesus asking his apostles, "Hey, stay up for me," and they can't. They go to sleep on it. So the script kind of flips.
I also
there a little
thought
bit.
about that, and I have that down as well. And the script is flipped, but also think about the storms.
Yeah.
Okay, I think it was important too in that particular scenario. The storm that is occurring is, Jesus is asleep. And it's a physical storm that's occurring, and they're all afraid and they're scared. Later on, they can't stay awake for him when Jesus is going through the biggest storm of his life. And that's something that we have to remember. Jesus is warning us to up our game in a sense, okay, in regards to that, and understand. But he's going through the biggest storm of his life at that time. So I thought that was something to think about as well. Any other comments on other times they were sleeping? Because there's more than one. Denise, you had a comment this morning to me about them sleeping. Do you? Okay, go ahead. Heal Peter's mother-in-law, what now? Okay. Yeah. Yeah, I thought especially the Mount of Transfiguration was one that maybe you wouldn't think about, but they fell asleep there as well. Think about those things. But it's interesting. Joe, do you have any comments on that? Somebody get him a mic.
Yeah, just backing up just a little bit on the intentionality of Jesus. I see John 4 here. There's another point in time we know Jesus is exhausted, and it says he's exhausted. He sits down by the well, and he reaches out to the most marginalized person in the community, or potentially the most marginalized in the community. Here, there's an intentionality. He said, let's go to the other side. And he's intentional about where he's going. And he is showing the kingdom. He's showing that all these seed parables that have taken place, we've got our own ideas about what good fertile ground looks like. And Jesus starts showing us, here are all these fertile grounds that you're overlooking, and you have no idea that this person is ready to serve in the kingdom. And the message that I'll usually leave with when I'm in this lesson is that Jesus cares about the one, so much so that when he's exhausted, he will still head for the one. He shows that at the woman by the well. He shows that, and there's a lot of other parallels, and I won't get into all that because I don't want to rush ahead in the lesson, but that is one of the other things. The other thing that's kind of important here, I think, is that he said he was only speaking in parables, and we can kind of look at this thing on the water as a parable. Parable means to lay beside, and what he's showing is that this parable of Jesus' action is he's showing who he is.
That's right.
He's laying himself alongside the one who created, along with him, who created weather, who created the wind, who created the storm, who created the ocean, or in this case, the big lake.
Right.
So it's
Very
just
good.
interesting the way
There's a lot.
there's a lot there. And without getting too far, we're going to see 3 levels of uncleanness and right in a row here, or 3 different kinds of unclean.
Okay.
Terry?
Thank you. Oh, okay. Hold on, John. Terry, go ahead.
Also, can't help but think of Jonah. That Jonah's asleep when things happen, and they wake him up. He's hiding in the bottom of the ship,
Yeah.
and Jonah is on a ship, so he doesn't go
Yeah.
to do
Exactly.
God's will.
Right.
And this is the opposite. And this is where something greater than Jonah has come in another way. That Jesus is on a ship going in order to go and to share the message of the gospel of the kingdom. And yet he's asleep in the middle of a storm too.
Sure.
And the difference is he has nothing to be afraid of because he's actually fulfilling the will of God versus Jonah, who is not. So there's a lot of tie-ins
Sure.
to that as well. I'll say this as well. We don't have a good appreciation for this, but especially for the Jews, if you think about water
Yeah.
in the Old Testament, with the exception of the Red Sea and the Jordan, which were deliverance scenes through water and God's supernatural hand, water was terrifying to them.
Yeah.
And you think about even Revelation, that there's monsters that come from the water.
Yeah.
So, we think about them being fishermen, we make a big deal out of that, but the reality is they had a very healthy respect for water, and it's pretty interesting when you look at the Old Testament just how often water is in a negative standpoint. Even though we think about giving life and those kind of things, waters can be a terror as well.
Sure. Very good point. John? Oh, John says no. All right. Okay. So just to kind of wrap up this section a little bit, how does Jesus, and we may already have, but how does Jesus connect fear with the lack of faith here? How does Jesus connect fear with the lack of faith?
They've got faith. It's skinny.
There you go.
I mean, they get them. They wake them up.
Yeah.
But to stop it,
Yeah.
to do something about it, but their faith is skinny, and I'm sure that Jesus has got to be wondering, what are y'all going to do when I'm gone? How are y'all going to behave when I'm not here and you can't see me? Go ahead. Hayden.
This just hit me. I know we talked about this. I don't know if it was this particular story or another one a couple months ago, but we had a really good conversation about that, and this just hit me. I think the reason why it's a negative thing that they were more fearful than faithful was because is that they had Christ on board. That's the man who's going to save humankind. He's not going to die in a storm. I don't know if that makes any sense. You should know, me personally, if I'm on that boat and I have Christ in the bottom, asleep, there's a storm arising, there should be a hint of, well, I'm going to be okay because God's Son is on the boat. So, I don't know.
Okay.
And Jesus does point out, you know, you don't be afraid of what can kill the body.
Yeah.
You be afraid. You be
kill the
afraid
soul.
of what can take out your soul.
Yeah.
So you know that could be an answer to that question as well.
Sure.
But
Agreed. Jonathan?
Yeah, I mean, one thing that kind of occurred to me recently on this is they wait until they are in dire need before waking up Jesus. They wait until they are perishing. They tried to handle the storm themselves,
Okay.
and they couldn't do it. They didn't have the faith or the confidence or the trust to go to him with that. I think sometimes there's a parallel for us in that. When we have problems in our life, we try to handle it ourselves, and our last
Really good.
resort is turning to God.
That's a really good point. I appreciate that too. And I'll wind this up. I like the term that you just coined, I guess, skinny faith. But I like that. But, you know, because I can relate to that at times in my life, you know, skinny faith, right? So I have faith in Jesus up until a point that I don't. Okay? And when is that I don't? Well, you know, I probably would have been just like them on this boat at the time, because I got this faith. I've been seeing all these things he's done, and I've been listening to what he said. And, of course, he just told me about a mustard seed and the faith that comes from a mustard seed. And now I'm on this boat, and it's just a little while afterwards that he's talked about this, and he's told me what it means. And then I'm out there, and now I'm starting to freak out. That's me in my life so many times. So many times. I'm trying to be better than that in my life. And at this point, they just aren't there. Okay? The world overtook them, you know, at that point. Just for that fleeting moment, the world overtook them. And so Jesus is still teaching them, Jesus is still bringing them along. And he shows them who he is.
like you said, and they've seen him do miracles. They've seen him.
Yep.
You know, they're about to see him raise somebody from the dead.
Right.
They've seen him cast out demons. They've heard demons proclaiming.
Yeah.
They've heard the Holy Spirit proclaim. Yeah. And all they've got a lot of
gives
evidence.
me hope.
They've got a lot of evidence, and here they are. They're got this
right.
little storm. You know.
That's right.
Go ahead, Terry.
Just real quick, I was talking to somebody this week who'd been studying with a Jew about this idea of, well, if you saw the miracles, surely you would believe. And this Jewish person reminded him that in the Old Testament, one of the things that was prophesied was that at the time, that in time, that there would actually be delusional signs that would be sent. That would be, and so the Jews would discount things because
Correct.
they were also expecting false signs,
Sure.
not just true signs.
You're right.
And I think we sometimes forget that. Mark, and I think John said that before, or Joe said this before. Mark, there's a turning point in chapter 8, the healing of the blind man and the confession of Peter, where things turn. Up until that point, you're going to see the disciples literally on a roller coaster of understanding and belief.
Yeah.
And I will just add to that real quick. That's still us today. Like, we know the whole story, and we still suffer from a roller coaster of faith and understanding. So
Yep, I agree with that.
we need to be gracious in regards to them about that, because we do the same thing.
So now he's going to show them that he
Yes.
can control the
Fix
weather.
it. Yeah, and for time, we're
Immediately.
gonna have to move into it. Go ahead.
Real quick here. In pointing out that Jesus is pointing out who he is, we can turn to Psalm 89, verses 9 and 10, Psalm 65, verses 8, and Psalm 107, verse 29, which, of course, they would be familiar with these Psalms.
Right.
And it talks, each one of them, about God's control over calming the storm. And when he does that, when he does this living parable, he's saying, this is who I am.
Yes.
Because they know, according to the Psalms of David, and I'm not certain David wrote all these Psalms, but each one of them, it's attributed to God's power over nature.
Sure.
And he shows it here.
Right.
And,
An important point. Again, they would know those songs.
right. So it's, once
they've been
again,
taught
it's
that.
he's still proving
Just connecting it all.
chapter 1, verse 1, the beginning of the gospel of Jesus
Jesus
Christ,
Christ.
the Son of God.
Right.
He's proving that. And
Good point.
faith building.
Yep. So he calms the sea. So nature itself, the sea, the winds, they all testify to who he is. Gets to the other side. Okay. So when they get over there, what happens to Jesus immediately? What happens as soon as they get there, based on our reading here? Mark 5. We're into Mark 5 now. All right, and he meets him. How does he meet him? Yeah. Okay. Yeah, he says he met him. There he is. He comes up, running up to him, right? Okay. And so, what does he say? Okay, leave us alone. Okay, so if we read that real quickly, he stepped out in verse 2. Jesus steps out of the boat. Immediately there met him out of the tombs. He's in the tombs now, first of all. A man with unclean spirit, because he lived among those tombs. No one can bind him anymore, not even with a chain. So we know all this. Shackles, the whole deal. And yeah, he cries out, Son of God, Son of the Most High God,
Don't torture me.
Yeah, don't torture me. Don't do it. So that's all interesting. To me, is this whole trip. He steps out, and immediately there's this. Okay. So
It's an interesting event, and all three of the Gospels talk about it. And each event, when you pick up something from each one, a little bit different from each one of the Gospels.
Yep.
Like so many things, but this one, it seems, is just is a little bit special about it. You get this demon coming out begging for mercy.
That's right.
Don't send us other versions of it will say don't send us to the abyss. Don't do us in before our time.
Right.
That kind of stuff, and Jesus doesn't torture them. Doesn't throw him to the abyss.
That's right. That's right. And of course, we find out through the course of the story when he asks his name, it's Legion. So there's more than one here. It's within the man.
And this guy's he's super strong because of him, and it looks like he's been trying to kill himself.
Yeah.
I mean, cutting himself with pottery shards and just doing, these demons are just doing all kinds of horrible things to the guy.
Right. Those are the traits in chapter 2. It'd be one of the traits right there. I remember a couple of them. To me, that called out. He lives among the tombs. He's cutting himself. He's screaming out all the time. And just all these types of things. But he's really strong as well because he can't even bind him with shackles. Right. Okay.
Doesn't have a lot of friends.
Doesn't
have a lot of friends.
Doesn't have a lot of friends. That's right.
They're not
Denise,
treating
you
him
have
right.
your hand up. What is most people going to do, Denise? Yeah. Set sail back into, hey, let me go back to the storm, something, right?
This is why we don't preach to the Gentiles. That's what I would ever think of.
Yeah. Yeah. So all this that goes on, we know Jesus commands the demons, or commands the spirits to leave the man, right? And we know that cast them where? The demon didn't want to be sent where? Yeah, they wanted to stay there. They wanted to be cast out, didn't want to be sent where? Where did they not want to be sent? Yeah. They didn't want to go there. Isn't that amazing? They didn't want to go there. To me, I always think about demons wanting to be in hell. All right? I mean,
Bad place.
it's Satan's folks, right? Yeah. Isn't that where they want to be? Evidently not. So he cast them into a herd of pigs at their request. 2,000 or so pigs.
2,000.
That's a lot of, that's a lot of pigs.
That's a lot.
You ever slopped a hog?
That's a lot of,
that's a lot
that's
of
a lot
pigs,
of free-range
dude.
pigs right there.
That's a lot of pigs. And then they run into the ocean over a cliff. Okay?
Which just shows you, they were trying to get that man to kill himself. Took 2,000 pigs that long
That quick.
to decide to go jump.
That's a pretty interesting thought too, right?
the idea that, there's something inside of us that wants to, maintain and stay alive,
Yeah,
compared to an animal.
good points. Any other comments? Oh, there's no doubt. That's exactly it. Amen. Sovereign over everything. It just shows his sovereignty. That's a great point. Joe?
Sorry, Jonathan. Yeah, I want us to develop the scene just a little more.
Yeah.
The guy's clearly, he's cut up, he's cut himself up, he's scarred up. And Matthew tells us that people were so afraid of this situation that they wouldn't even pass by. They called him fierce. But he's got no clothes on.
Yeah.
And he's running he's coming up to Jesus. And Jesus is intentionally got in the boat to go see this man here and go heal this man. And when we think, well, I'm too far gone. That's the other message. I'm too far gone. Folks who are incarcerated or in other situations,
Sure.
I can't. Have you gone this far?
Yeah.
Are you living? Are you digging up tombs and you living in the grave? Jesus felt like he was. Jesus showing us the worth of his creation, and even as ugly as we are, when we don't have him, we're not clothed with him. He still stands there and he deals with us and brings us. We're going to see what happens to the man. He doesn't stay unclothed. He doesn't stay out of his mind. And that's the really important part about this encounter with Jesus.
That's really, really important. So, how do they know the demon-possessed man is free from demons?
His behavior changed
His behavior changed dramatically.
dramatically.
Right? He's
Yeah.
sitting there in his right mind,
With clothes on.
and he's got clothes on. Okay, right? So that's how we know. And that's. But how do the people react to that?
They get mad. They're scared. They get
Scared.
mad. Tell them to leave.
Yeah, they're scared. Yeah, some upset folks over their pigs too, right? So I mean, but seriously, they're scared. It's like, man, who is this guy? What?
Was Jesus being insensitive? Killing all them pigs? That gets brought up a lot.
Was he being insensitive? You what? He didn't kill him. You're right. Yeah.
You just wonder if Jesus, sitting there wondering, you guys, y'all will take better care of those pigs than you did this man. Yes, Terry.
Just real quick, this story is a great picture of ourselves in sin and salvation. That the sin in our life is trying to spiritually kill us.
I can't for some reason.
And a lot of times, rather than us letting the sin go, we want to keep it. And when you talk about this, demons are trying to kill him. That's what sin does to us. And we try to keep it around. And a lot of times, like this guy, when we're finally come out of that sinful life, the people around us don't like us anymore either. Right? So there's just a lot of parallels to redemption, salvation, sin in this healing in this story.
All right. Okay, in verse 3 of Isaiah 65, Joe wanted to bring this up. Isaiah 65, people who provoke me to my face continually, sacrificing in gardens and making offerings on bricks, who sit in tombs and spend the night in secret places, who eat pig's flesh and broth of tainted meat is in their vessels, who say, keep to yourself, do not come near me, for I am too holy for you. These are a smoke in my nostrils, a fire that burns all day. Should be a connection there. Think there's a connection there from Isaiah? Is the point. And the people that are with him we'll make this connection. Okay? We'll make this connection. Yes, Alicia. Yeah. Yeah. Sit. Right. Yeah. Right. All good points. Yeah. Really great. Okay. So, you know, we know the people. So what about the people real quick? When they see him, what is their reaction? We talked about that a little, but what is their reaction? Okay. There you go. Yeah. And Joe points out in this question here in 4 about, the difference in how Jesus is entreated or begged at the end of the story. And I think that's the point, Denise. The people came and saw and begged Jesus to leave. Okay? It scared them. Okay? They no longer had their pigs, number one, and undesiring of Jesus at that point. There's not. But what about the man who had been possessed? What did he do? He begged to be with Jesus. And we know that Jesus told him, what? No, you're not coming. You're going home. And I want you to testify. I want you to talk to everybody and tell them all about what has happened. Now, do we always see that? No. But in this case, we do. It's important. And do we think this area is predominantly Jew or Gentile?
Gentile.
Gentile. The capitalist, right, is there. So it's made up of a lot of Gentile cities. They're really important. Jesus went to the Gentiles here. Very, very important. Yes.
Just real quick, this is also similar to John 4 because Jesus tells the woman to go back to Samaria,
Yes,
to the Samaritan
correct.
people. And I think part of the reason why both of these individuals don't follow Jesus is they're not Jews.
Yeah, yeah.
So he's actually going out and doing this, but he's telling them it's their job to go out and talk about him in their communities, in their areas. It's very interesting to see that.
Yep.
And to bring, if he'd brought this man back to Jerusalem with him, let's say, that would have done greater damage than the way he leaves
Yeah.
the man.
The last point on this is a point that's already been made. I think Joe made a good point of it a while ago. Jesus cares about the one sheep that's lost. Right? He cares about the one, and the worst of the worst. He cares that much. And we got just a couple of minutes. We got to get to the older woman and little girl here in Mark 5. So describing the scene here when Jesus comes back to the western shore of Galilee. What do we have here?
Hordes of people.
Huge crowds.
just crowds wanting to be around Jesus. Yeah.
That's right. And he's beside the sea, it says. Okay? Hordes of crowds. So who asked Jesus to heal his daughter, and what is his position in life? Who was it?
A man named Jairus. He is a synagogue leader, and so you can think of him. He's a high up Jew.
The Jew, big time Jew, right?
Right.
He's coming to Jesus, right? Right? Okay. And he wants him to heal his daughter. And so along the way, he's with him, and he's walking along the way, and then we have another person that comes into the scene. It's an older woman, right?
Well, you got a man that's quote unquote important.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
And you contrast with a woman who's quote unquote unimportant.
Yeah.
But Jesus sees them both the same.
Okay. Right. And so we've got that man. We've got his daughter, young person. Okay. She's sick. And then you've got the older woman, okay, who would maybe not be so important. And she's got what? What's wrong with her?
She's bleeding.
Yeah.
For 12 years.
12 years. Discharge of blood. And she spent everything she's got. She's destitute in that sense. She spent it all trying to heal. It's that important, her health to her, okay, in regards. She was unclean. She shouldn't have been in the midst. But she made her way through. And what did she do? She touched the hem of his garment. And she was healed. Now, what caused her to be healed? It was her faith. Exactly. And Jesus goes on to talk about that, right? But, of course, we see this scene, and we can't stay on it very long, where Jesus is like, hey, wait a minute, who touched me? Showing power once again, right?
Well, yeah, and it gives you an idea of the crowd because the disciples look at him like,
What? They ain't saying to him,
really?
how do you know this?
Really? You want to know who touched you? You got all these people pressing up against you, and you want to know who touched you? Everybody.
He said, I
Everybody
felt the
touched.
power go out.
Yeah.
So that gives us an idea of Jesus and who he is and how, he knows. And there's a point here in doing that. And then she says, it was me. I just had to do it. I knew that you could heal me. And Jesus blesses her. Her faith, he says, made her well. The great physician, right? Her faith made her well. All right. What report comes to Jesus before he gets to the house of the ruler, where the young girl's at? What? She's dead. Ain't no reason to trouble the master anymore, the teacher anymore. She's dead. But Jesus told him what? Don't fear. All right, come on. Only believe. Only believe. Only believe. So he goes in, and as he gets there, they're laughing at him.
What's he supposed to be believing in, Scott?
Hey, the man came to him wanting him to heal his daughter. Okay? So now it's his daughter, so he's trying everything he can too. But he's heard about it, seen it, whatever. Okay? Only believe. So, anyway, after Jesus' resurrection, I'm sorry, we won't go there first. So he gets there to the house, and they're laughing, once he tells them, they're saying, oh, she's dead. And he's like, oh, what are you mourning about? What's all that? She's just sleeping. She's just sleeping. And they laughed at him. He don't care.
Yeah, and this is normally I'd read this and you get through it real quick, but thanks to Joe, there's a lot being said in these two things here. First of all, this woman that's bleeding has been doing it for 12 years.
Yeah.
And you think about, and then you've got this girl that's a 12-year-old an old woman that's 12. For 12 years she's been bleeding.
Right.
And now you've got this young girl that's 12. That's not an accident.
Right.
That's in there. And then you've got this representation of the old covenant.
Under the woman?
With the older woman. And,
And the new covenant.
And the new covenant with this 12-year-old girl. You've got, the 12 tribes. You've got the 12 apostles.
Yeah.
Here, and there's a lot being said about that. And what did you have to do in the old covenant? You had to slaughter animals. You can imagine what the tabernacle or the temple looked like. We see nice pictures of it and all, but it was probably a bloody mess for all that time.
Sure.
And that's coming to an end.
Yep.
And so Jesus, there's a lot more depth in these healings and this resurrection.
And these connection points, right? We've been going through this, and I think one of the things that's really trying to be brought out is, the connections that the people should be making, right? For what they've been taught all this time and now, but the representations that are here, the connections, and then Jesus, what did it say? It didn't say Jesus would destroy the old covenant. It said he would do what? Fulfill it. That's what he's doing. He's trying to show them that. He's fulfilling it. The old law to the new. The old law to the new. And so we don't have any real time left here. We've got like a minute.
What do you suppose the reason was the apostles he brought with him? Why did he pick those three?
Comments?
I don't know.
Why did he pick those three to go with him? Ms. Wanda?
Joe's smiling. F4.
That's right. Yes. Right. Right. The dark side, right? Yeah. Life. Yes. Yeah. That's right. That's right. Very. Really good comment. Great comment. Yeah, he covered so much here. Yes, and then we're done. That's right.
And then the next scene, you'll see them going up to the Garden of Gethsemane. The same
It's the same ones.
keep getting separated. We don't have time to dive any further.
Good comments. Great class. Appreciate everybody. Thank you so much. Next time will be chapter 5. I'm sorry, lesson 5.
I heard me call.